Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Stormworks. In this one, I got a little bit more of a technical one for you, so definitely stick around for that. We're going to be talking about engine cooling for our large-ish kind of ship. So, definitely kind of a little bit more of a technical one. So we'll be talking about what I'm doing. Hopefully you guys can learn a little bit something from that. But if you guys do like the build series so far, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. The channel's been doing so well lately, so I really appreciate it, guys. You guys have been killing it. You really seem to like this carrier build, so I'm trying to work on it as much as I can. I'm gonna keep making these videos, and then I know a lot of you are eager to play with it. So as soon as it's done, I'll get it on the workshop. But enough of that. We will kind of talk a little bit more about what we're doing today. So, like I said, we're going to be working on our cooling for our engines, and this isn't going to be the only episode. We're gonna have a few more episodes of working on the engines and stuff. But this is going to be the first kind of cooling loops that we do, and the goal with this is I'm going to have four different cooling loops coming off of the engines that go to heat exchangers that use seawater to do the heat exchanging. You'll see we kind of have a pretty decent plan for this. I have a lot of room to work with in this engine room. So the cooling system for this is going to be rather complex, but just bear with me. And, it might seem a little crazy what I'm doing right now, but I will explain a lot of that later. But yeah, guys, for the meantime, just sit back, relax, enjoy, and I will cut back in and we'll talk a little bit more about what I've done. All right, so I kind of have part of the cooling system laid out. And this is going to be a very, very, very complex system, guys. So just bear with me. I'm going to do my best to kind of explain what I'm doing here. But essentially right now what you're seeing is this is two different cooling loops going into a 5x5 radiator. The 5x5 radiator is then vented to the hangar deck outside, so the ambient temperature. The reason I'm doing this is because the radiators, if you were unaware, they are affected by the ambient temperature of the space they are in Stormworks. So if you place the radiators outside and it's colder outside than the engine, which it almost always is going to be, it's going to cool better. So it's I don't know exactly how much of a difference this makes, but I do know it makes a difference. So while we're on the practice of max minning everything on this ship, that's kind of what's going on here. So, and then I'm going to actually add more loops too. So this is going to be doubled on the hangar deck. And then each one of these cooling loops is also going to get its own liquid-liquid heat exchanger that seawater is going to circulate through. So it's going to be quite complex, but it's a lot of engine and a lot of ship. So we need to have a lot of different cooling systems. So we're going to keep expanding on this. Like I said, it's going to double in size. And I'm going to add a lot more loops. I think as it currently stands, which I probably won't change it all that much more because the engine's been operating really well. The engines operate at a max RPS of 9 RPS. That gets us to a top speed of about 47 knots in an overdrive gear and a cruising speed of about 30 knots. So I would say that this is definitely pretty fair in the ballpark of what we want to be around in the aircraft carrier. Obviously, faster is better, but for the sake of realism and longevity of the engines, they're going to stay at about 10 RPS. So I don't really think the ship needs to be going much faster than 50 knots. If you guys disagree, let me know. Maybe I can make it a speedboat. I don't know. But yeah, so that's kind of what we got going on with the cooling system. I'm going to continue working on it. And then, obviously as it gets more complex, I'm going to explain it more and more so you guys can hopefully follow along a little bit more. So I assume most of you are pretty familiar with the game, and I can pretty reasonably assume that you guys know that cooling in Stormworks isn't necessarily the simplest thing. So I'm just going to talk about it a little bit more. Obviously, I've got my tutorial series. The modular engine videos aren't out yet, but it is something that will be coming up, and I'll obviously talk about the cooling a little bit more in depth. But essentially how the cooling works in Stormworks is it is based off of a couple things. So to my knowledge, it is based off the RPS that the engine is running in. So essentially the RPM of a normal engine. And then it also takes in consideration the amount of fuel that is being put into the engine. And then as well, it takes into consideration how much load is on the engine itself. So if you have a very, very, very big engine that has very little load on it, you don't really need to put a complex cooling system in it. This is different because this engine that we are working on, the aircraft carrier, I'm squeezing every bit of performance out of that I can. So we really need to make sure that this thing can keep itself cool. The main reason that you see me doing all of these loops and stuff is because I find, personally, I think that the cooling in Stormworks probably could have a little bit of work done to it. These engines are a little ridiculous to cool. Sometimes it seems like the radiators really don't do anything a lot. But that's why I like to do a range of different cooling systems. So a lot of times I will cool the coolant via a double loop like this. So a radiator on the fresh water and then colder seawater mixing into a heat exchanger with the fresh water. On top of this, I usually will, if I'm really, really going crazy on the cooling, I will put air intercoolers on the engine, as well as, a few other just minimum things that don't really matter. I know later on in this ship, I talked about putting the radiators outside because it's better to vent the heat to the ambient temperature. One of the other things you can do is inside of the engine room, which there's still going to be some radiators later on. Inside the engine room, I actually cool the engine room. So the temperature inside the engine room is going to be colder than the rest of the ship, actually, which is kind of neat. I could add air conditioning to the whole ship, but it's kind of not really necessary in my mind. As long as there's a few spots where you can kind of go and cool off, I think you'll be all right. But yeah, so, in this episode, we're just going to kind of take this first loop and we're going to run with it. And then I'm essentially just going to copy and paste this loop and make another one. So you guys will see that. And then right here, I'm going to add a few smaller, simpler little loops on the top for the engines. So this thing is I'm basically just going to spam radiators everywhere I can. I'm going to make it look as good as I can too. So, it might be a little bit messy. Keep in mind this engine's going to change quite a bit. So I think towards the end, the engine actually ends up looking really, really good. But that's for later. And you see right here, I'm kind of just playing around with a pressure relief valve on the coolant. I don't know if this is actually necessary, but I figured it's something that could be useful. But yeah, so this is what this is. I do believe it's here to stay, but I do know later on I go back and I put 3x3 radiator loops up in this above the engine, above the crankcase head. And then I cover it up. It's got like a nice little engine cover, and we decorated it and stuff. But yeah, that's more or less what we're going for. Obviously, this engine room needs a lot more detailing done, and we have plenty of space. So that second loop is just going to go right behind this one. It's going to, like I said, basically be just copy and pasted. So essentially, it's going to work the same way. And this is kind of working, but the engine eventually heat soaks, so I need to add a lot more coolant to it. But I think in the end, we get it to a really good spot where you could pretty much just cruise comfortably at about 50 knots and the engine won't overheat. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it kind of chugs some fuel when you're going that fast, but it's also not necessarily a very light ship. So, but yeah, guys, that's kind of my rant on cooling for now. Like I said, we'll talk about it a lot more in a later tutorial episode. I'll give you guys a better rundown for how you can better cool your engines and stuff. But the basic rule of thumb is just as much flow as you can and multiple loops. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for today. So if you made it to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. You guys have been killing it lately. So like I said earlier, I'm going to keep cranking these videos out. I'm going to get this carrier done as soon as I can so you guys can play with it. But yeah, that's it for today. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.